Yeah, so on top of doing an interview, I ended up getting not one, but two, and then several other, a duplicate of the other one, and then an addendum to that as well. So all of a sudden, there's probably an hour of Toe and So Long content on the internet. Just an extra hour of Toe and So Long content on the internet to talk about. So I have been accused maybe by some people of not being able to take criticism. And I think that's fun. I think that's fun to toy around with the idea of. And so what I want to do is turn the content about my content into more content. That's what we do. That's what we do in the year 2024. We're milking the content. But I don't just want to sit here and watch it. I want to talk about it. I want to respond to the critique. And I think we're going to go through the valid criticism of what I think is a valid criticism first. So let's hop over to that. As you can see, artwork for Toe and So Long displayed there. Now, one thing they did, I think, and all right, let's go right into it.
Critiquing Comics returns this week with a comic we just couldn't put down and one that we couldn't quite pick up on.
Okay, so that right there they say a comic we couldn't quite pick up on, and it is respectively the one on the left they couldn't put down. It's like 500 pages of this, murder comic or something like that, and then my childlike imagination kind of off the wall, and they couldn't quite pick up on. So does that mean they think it's bad? Well, the review they don't really slam it in the review. I can tell that the one guy is definitely not into it, and he's so into this 500-page murder mystery that he just might not be the correct audience for it. And it's hard when you're making a comic book, when you're trying to reach out to new people, when you're trying to, get people to read the damn thing, you kind of have to take a shotgun approach, is what I'd call it, a spray approach, and throw it at a bunch of different people, because I don't think I'm making something that there's a standard plug and play comics, section that I can just be like, here's this, and people be like instantly, oh, I know what that, I love that, yeah, give it to me. I think it's got something a little edge to it, or something a little unique to it. So I like to throw it out to a lot of different people, because I think that people who may not have thought they would like it will like it. Maybe I'm an idiot, but it's a little baity. They're trying to get you to watch the whole thing, and it's not like the most glowing review of all time. So I understand. With
Adam in Nagoya, how are you doing?
Not bad, Tim. How's everything?
Nagoya, I had to look up this other guy. He has a very thoughtful take.
Sunday, March 31st, but now it seems like it's going to be a little cooler again for a few weeks. Cherry blossoms are finally blooming.
Yeah, it's that time of year where you have free license to get drunk in the park.
You do not have free license to get drunk in the park, y'all.
That's Japan. This is a puzzling comic with a puzzling name. It's called Toe and So Long. So Toe, T-O-E. The creator is Jacob Michael Campbell. He's writing it, and the artist is Alexis Vivallo.
So that's me, and that's the old artist.
Toe and So Long are the two main characters. Toe is this kind of humanoid creature who's entirely white.
That's okay. First of all, this is what I love about reviews. This is what I love about how people look at your art, and is obviously not white, or obviously not white. Is not a white character. He's gray. He's gray. And all the things I write about him, he's a gray humanoid creature. And they're going to talk a little bit more about the design. And the one guy seems to have one opinion, doesn't express it. The other guy. Anyways, they're going to talk a bit about him. But I think it's just so rich that whenever somebody's talking about your art, they never got the whole thing. I mean, it does give you kind of a respect for the critic in the way that, they need to be able to, right, exactly. He's like, he's not white. How did you miss out? How did you miss out on, did you watch it? Did you read it on like a really bright screen? I don't know how you did it. So criticism needs to be merited. And right off the bat, I'm having a hard time. Now, the guy who said he's white is the guy who seems to have the worst opinion of the comic book. And it just feels like there's something at the surface level that is just like stopping them from even really looking at the comic book. And I don't want to hate on them for it. They have a YouTube channel. They Deconstructing Comic Books, Critiquing Comics 235. You can find it. I don't hate on the guy for not being able to spend a lot of time on something, but I guess maybe not enough stuff is coming through their doors. I sent out this email like a week ago, and they picked up right on it. I'm super grateful, but you're objectively wrong. This is an objectively wrong statement that is going to color how I view your criticism. So this is input for critics as well. I don't want to throw them down the well, but dang.
By a 6-year-old. Looks like he was drawn by a 6-year-old. Just got a really, really simple face that looks like it was drawn on. Now, if I were talking to a Japanese, I would say he looks kind of like Teruteru Bozu, but I don't know that our
Teruteru Bozu is kind of like that Pikachu ghost
what
thing.
That is
Pokemon.
Teruteru Bozu,
the one that looks like Pikachu, but it's a ghost. That's what that is.
It's like a rain charm, right?
Way of drawing a Teruteru Bozu face is a little bit different from this.
Yeah,
but it's
I don't see it so
simple.
much, but. Maybe because he's white?
Yeah, about this face, I think, what it reminded me a little bit of is that famous street artist Kaws, Kaws. It's like this kind of cutesy, bubbly skull. And this guy kind of looks like that because he's got the weird little mouth that's like, I don't know, it's almost like a mustache with no mustache, like his skin is in the shape of a mustache, or I don't know.
I want to look up.
To be honest, I actually kind of like his design. It is very simple, like you
I've
said,
seen this stuff.
but it's it feels finished to me. So it's almost like a Peanuts character, the way that it's very, very simplified, but it still feels complete.
Yeah.
So that's glowing.
So I was actually
so. You just heard this first guy describe it. 6-year-old face looks like it's drawn on. There's sort of like a snark to it. There's sort of like a dismissal of it. I can just hear it in the tone of their voice. Maybe I'm reading into it too much, but they don't seem enthused. Nothing about his take on it seems enthused. But then this other guy swings in and he's like, this feels like a finished character design. This feels complete. It doesn't feel like it was half done. Essentially, he's saying that this was a conscious decision and a stylistic choice. That's what I pick up. He seems to understand that. And I don't think the other guy's ignorant of that, but he may have an opinion on the art style itself. Again, I've talked about Crazy Cat on here as a comic, rated the best comic of all time. And it's got a very minimalistic style. There's this mouse with stick arms, literally stick arms. So anyways, let's keep going.
More interested in the design of
Thank you, Shino,
than I was of So Long, because
So Long is a black cat.
Yeah. So,
and they're a strange pair just in terms of character design. Because So Long is a pretty normal-looking black cat, well, a cartoony black cat with a bandana around his or her neck. I don't know the genders of these characters. And that's because I'm a progressive comic book artist, and I have not gendered the characters. Did you gender my character? No, I have not gendered the characters. There will be gendered characters in the comic, but it's going to be plot relevant. They were not gendered in Crazy Cat either, and that's something that I picked up on from Crazy Cat, so I think that's interesting. It's just kind of a strange pairing.
It is, yeah. So here's my take on this, is I think the artwork feels very influenced by like Adventure Time and like that era of like Cartoon Network kind of programming.
And that's not untrue. There's a lot of Adventure Time influence in this. I started developing my illustration style around that time, you know, the mid 2000s. Adventure Time was like just its, what do you call that? The pilot episode of Adventure Time, like went around and I watched it on YouTube in like 2006, right? So there was a lot of stuff like that going on and I learned about it. And, you know, I'd always kind of drawn cartoony and simplified and I grew up with Cartoon Network. So it makes total sense. I like to compare the comic book to, it's like Rick and Morty meets Adventure Time, but without all the screaming and yelling. And that's not to say that there's never like loudness in the comic book. There definitely is. But Rick and Morty and Adventure Time can often just be like, there's a character Lemon Grab in Adventure Time that literally all they do is scream. So I don't have that so much in my comic book. That's not my delivery so much. Screaming. Not in this sense. Not my storytelling.
These two, this combination reminds me a lot of Finn and Jake from Adventure Time, where you have just a kind of weirdly shaped human who's walking around with a, you know, talking dog. And this is swapping that for a cat. But the artwork in general has a very similar feel. And actually the humor sense has a similar feel as well, because it has this kind of cavalier humor sense where they might be in a really weird or dangerous situation, but they don't seem to care at all.
Yeah, that tone was really reminding me of Adventure Time.
Yeah.
And so we'll talk about the story a little bit. Well, so...
Yeah, in Adventure Time, again, the comic sensibility, the way they talk, I will be honest, this is kind of like, it was inspired by Adventure Time, but the way I delivered dialogue, heavily inspired by personal experiences, perhaps with psychedelics, and the way that psychedelics will help you form a sentence structure. And it was just something I tapped into, and a prosy way of speaking, a sing-songy way of speaking. And they say Adventure Time, but again, Crazy Cat does all this poetic stuff, and I can't explain to you what Crazy Cat is right now. Go check it out. But we're all pulling from this deeper, much, much deeper source. So I like that poetic prose, and I like structuring things. I'm not going to blow my whole load here, but Crazy Cat, guys, this is not just Adventure Time. It's Crazy Cat. I'm not ripping off Adventure Time. Adventure Time is ripping off Crazy Cat, and so am I. Look into it.
They are apparently forever wandering this plane full of doors that are just standing around randomly. They call this the doorscape. Okay. He almost gets it. It's called the endless plane of doors, but the doorscape is the space between doors. So I don't say that so explicitly, but he did seem to neglect the endless plane of doors, and I do think I describe it with they traverse an endless plane of doors in the email. I'm so sorry. Email that I sent to them. So, I just feel like they skimmed over a lot of this comic book every time they talk about it. And that I'm glad the other guy seemed to enjoy it a little bit more because he fleshes it out. And they can just walk into any of the doors they want to and go into that reality. And in this episode, they enter a reality where people are ruled over by an authoritarian cathode ray tube monitor. And the people there all seem perfectly agreeable to whatever the CRT is saying.
Yeah.
We'll do this, we'll do that, and that's fine. Yeah, no problem. I wanted that to happen. And so
they're laughing,
nonchalant about it. And Toe and So Long are also kind of nonchalant about it. Well, I mean, they're saying things like, "Oh, another CRT that's an authoritarian ruler." It's
like they've seen it all.
Same day, different authoritarian CRT.
Yeah.
Or different day. Anyway, so they are captured because because they kind of don't belong there, or they don't quite fit in. And they're really nonchalant when they're in prisons. Like, are they going to try capital punishment on us? Just like, I wonder.
Almost excited about it, the prospect of it, right? Like, that's definitely what made me think of Adventure Time, is the fact that they know that there's not really any danger to them. Like, no matter what happens, they're pretty much okay. So, when they go to meet the CRT, when they're summoned to be right in front of him, the first thing that Toe says is "sup," right? And then, but the CRT is equally like kind of casual. Like, he starts every sentence with an "okay."
Yeah, he says "okay" a lot.
Yeah, which also happens to be, spoiler alert, the secret password for unlocking the hidden information. So, but yeah, I think that that worked in this comic's favor for sure. It had a very playful.
So this critique didn't pick up on things that the other critique is going to say about okay computer, but yeah, I guess they didn't quite get that one. Now, okay, let's go.
Kind of casual feeling to it the whole time, so you never the danger never really escalates. It's always just kind of this, you're along for the ride of this kind of craziness. So.
And it has some kind of like intentionally contradictory expressions in it, like a fascinating drudgery.
Yeah. I was actually a little bit worried when I came across that sentence, because the very first little bit of exposition, it seems like the writer was trying to be really, really verbose, maybe like intentionally trying to use really long sentences.
I don't know if they're that long. They are larger words. And so this is going to come up several times throughout when we watch this. And other people have said this to me, but I don't think that the bigger words that I use are that much of a barrier to anybody who's interested in language. And I am writing poetry. I'm trying to write prose for this. So it's interesting that he's reading poetry and he's worried, So I guess maybe he was worried he wasn't the majority of the story doesn't have a ton of giant words to it. It's just this flowery intro piece. So yeah, I figured people might pick up on that. There's no narration otherwise, really. So
it's full of big words. And then so I was like, oh, it's going to be that kind of a comic book. And then after that, there's hardly any exposition.
I will say, Shino, he says he's worried, but he doesn't say it's bad. So, I don't know what his takeaway is on it. He does point out that I will use larger words, but then he also goes, and at the end, he's like, it took me 15 minutes to read this. So it's not a dense read. There might be a dense section to slow you down for a goddamn minute to break out at the source. Maybe look at the art a little bit more while you think about it. That's what I want you to be able to pore over the art and get, absorbed into the world. A lot of people have been able to do that. But some people just have an aversion to larger words. They feel it's hyper pretentious. Hey, that's fine. But guess what? Guess who else used big words? Stan Lee. J.R.R. Tolkien, okay? These people did not, and they were throwing these words at kids. So obviously, and we'll talk about it more. We'll talk about it more. I don't even think they're making a severe criticism of it. They're just pointing out that it exists. And then I think maybe they were worried the whole book was going to be like that, but it's not.
At all. And the dialogue is, as we said, it's mostly like, very casual stuff of them saying "sup" and stuff like that. So,
and there are quite a few silent pages.
Yeah, exactly. Which is honestly the fact that this is a writer and a artist team. I think that shows kind of a lot of confidence in the writers ability because a lot of writers feel like they have to fill up every page with words.
Now, he doesn't realize that I'm also doing the layouts and that I did the character design and it's hard to explain the division of labor to people. It gets tedious to me, so I don't worry about it so much. This isn't a criticism of his criticism. I'm just saying that he doesn't know that I'm not just the writer. I'm also the layout artist. I'm the designer. And, I have my hand, and I think he does know that I'm the colorist, but I don't know. We'll
so
see.
If the writer lets the page breathe and gives lots of,
and I disagree. I think Stan Lee was a worse writer
like
than
that
me.
without any words at all. That means they trust the artist,
not Tolkien.
They trust the reader,
though Tolkien did write
the story out of it, even without,
Tolkien wrote about giant battles with men versus orcs, like a fucking insurance adjuster. Like 15,000 orcs were dead. 25,000 arrows were hewn. It's like he's taking toll of it. He's got a whole different thing. So when he does go into his prose, it's appreciated.
Over explaining everything. So
what's up, Marika?
I liked the art. I thought it was, the storytelling was fine, and it was a attractive art style and very colorful. The tone of the writing is nice, but I'm just not quite sure I understand what the point of this comic is. It seemed like the lesson was authoritarianism is bad.
Yeah.
So I don't understand where he's getting he's looking for a deeper meaning. And I think he missed it. I'm hesitant to kind of divulge why I tell this hyper simplified story and then make sort of a commentary on it. I feel like everybody's kind of missing, like there's a point at which Toe and So Long kind of go Super Saiyan and they are offended. They're taken aback. I illustrate them a little bit differently. I give them extra shading to make them look, a little bit more aggressive. I don't know how good it came out, but I did things to make it look like all of a sudden they're pissed. And you haven't seen them piss the whole comic. And why do they get pissed? Because I don't know. There's a reason though. There's a reason they get pissed. And that's actually what is going on. Because the authoritarianism is bad. Yeah, that is too simple and stupid of a fucking message to tell. I didn't ever want to tell that message. I wanted to use that archetypal story as a vehicle to kind of shift it back to the characters and show something about them. And I feel like maybe it happens too quick and people miss it. But I also feel like he's kind of skimming through the comics. So let's hear what he has to say.
Yeah. Oh, really? That had never occurred to me.
Well, it could be also.
Well, that's fair. You don't have to give me credit for art because, I don't do the penciling and inking. I do layouts and then I do color. It was funny to hear you talk about. We're gonna get to your review, dude. We're gonna get to it. Hold on.
This seems like sort of this adventure of the week kind of thing, where maybe there isn't any overarching kind of like point. It could just be that, they're on another adventure. That part reminds me a little bit of if you've ever seen the Netflix show Midnight Gospel, which was also made by the creator of Adventure Time. I believe. That one is a similar kind of thing. Where you have it's this guy who lives in space and he can like go into these weird virtual.
I've never seen Midnight Gospel, but I know it's beloved. So
and he ends up having these long.
I'm getting good comparisons,
but
at least
this is kind of like that where you never know exactly where you're going to go. They just kind of open a door randomly and go in for the adventure, and so it could be that they're not ever really trying to make a point. Maybe they're just having a fun little excursion into some world, but
it's sad that they didn't find a point to it. Like I say, there is one moment where they become enraged and they go in this, you see it here. They chose this panel where they're kind of powering up and they have the rainbow powers. Shouldn't say I'm better than Stan Lee. Well, I'm not saying I'm better than Jack Kirby. Let's put it that way. I think Stan Lee was very effective. I have criticisms, and this is the thing, though, too. I'm cutting to the chase. If people don't have criticisms of your thing, then your thing probably isn't good. Good art necessitates negative reactions. If you have art and it's truly good, then there has to be a percentage of people who don't like it, who feel strongly against it or don't understand it. So that alone isn't enough for me to, Stan Lee is criticized like that. Tolkien was criticized like that. When these guys came to the market, they were shat on endlessly. Stan Lee's publishers hated him. So,
which is fine. I'm fine with that. Like, I don't think it necessarily has to have some fine point on it. So,
I'm wondering, late in the story, this kind of,
and he was a nepo baby, by the way,
with little antlers appears, and I didn't understand what that was about. Maybe in future issues that would be explained. I don't know.
Yeah,
so he doesn't.
I wasn't sure, but I thought
he doesn't get it. He didn't read the comic. He didn't take the time to understand the material. This other guy did.
That might be like a dragon that formed out of whatever shot out of the cat's mouth.
Yeah, there's some Bee and Puppy Cat. I hadn't really watched Bee and Puppy Cat before I made this. I think I'd probably seen parts of it, but I actually watched Adventure Time.
That was my first thought, because you see him hold the cat almost like a gun.
But here's the thing, guys. Like I said, Crazy Cat. We are all pulling from a legacy far beyond 2006. Okay, we want to talk about inspiration and where what is coming from. We're all pulling from the same creative well. It's Carl Jung. Do some research on narrative.
And then this projectile comes shooting out, which at first I thought might be a hairball or something like that. But then it kind of loops around and comes back, and it's this dragon. But then after that, they wake up back in their...
Back on the doorscape.
In the doorscape. And
yeah, this guy understands it. He's on the wavelength.
So I thought maybe that dragon is what is...
The thing is, it's clear they both missed something in the final panel of issue 1. That makes it crystal clear what the dragon was. So, it's in there. You just have to actually look at the art.
Facilitating this door travel or something like that, because that is a mystery. The CRT wants to know how they get back to the doorscape. And they don't know. They just fall asleep and wake up back in the doorscape. So I thought maybe there's a possibility this dragon is connected to that as well. But it's not clear.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's clear.
They are kickstarting issue 2 right now. And I'm wondering, will future issues just be different versions of this, or will the kind of mysteries of it gradually be revealed? What is this dragon alligator thing, and how do they end up back on the doorscape after each adventure and that kind of thing?
Well, I told you that I told you.
A lot that they could still keep exploring, because obviously this story.
Now here's the thing: did I put a big chunk of narrative exposition that says, all of a sudden, the dragon Atticus came from the central point of energy that was created and comes back to swoops into... I don't want to write all that. That's the shit that Stan Lee would do that makes it so that I can't enjoy the comic book because it's half text and I'm dyslexic. So I try to keep the text, reasonable. And again, I don't understand why... this book, which is guys anyways.
Story leaves it open for the possibility for anything to happen at all.
Yes.
What's up, Silver Lily? Yo,
you know,
we'll take your bits.
I think it's very imaginative storytelling, and obviously the artwork really complements that. It's very, very colorful.
Imaginative, colorful.
A lot of gradients, but the gradients aren't like that tacky kind of like computer gradient. They actually look kind of brushed in. I do think I'm almost positive that this was created digitally, but even so, there is an effort to kind of make it look hand done in some things, in some cases. And there's some really cool stuff going on with
Nemo will probably have to fight you for that.
So the PDF that I have doesn't really have page numbers, but I think it's page 17. The CRT, you can actually see this kind of bright green, almost yellow green kind of glow around the monitor, and then the rest of the monitor kind of goes back to a standard green, and so it makes it look like it's glowing. In fact, that's probably every panel that shows the monitor. The front panel is this kind of glowing green.
It's fun to hear him gush over my effects that I spent some time on, and yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, that's true. The lighting effects
Again,
in general,
it just makes it
pretty well done.
It just sounds like one guy read the comic and the other guy skimmed through
right in the very beginning on the first page when they're walking, you can see the sun coming up over the plain, and there's these long shadows being cast from them, it shows that they understand, like, when the light source is at that point, it's going to do this, you know. So it's kind of cool. Like, you can tell that this person,
basic lighting theory, but
artwork,
basic rendering technique.
The backgrounds are mostly like just splashes of color and stuff like that, and the characters, as you said, are very simply drawn. But this artist clearly has a sense of composition and color balance and things like that. So my only real criticism of the
doesn't like some
there's
of the
a lot of
used
textures that sometimes don't necessarily go well with each other. So there's like some halftone patterns that look like old like standard kind of old pulp comics, but then they're with like more polished colors in the same frame.
Oops.
Or I don't know, there are some, like when they're in jail, there's a texture over the bars that looks very, very digital, very digitized almost. And then it just doesn't totally fit with some of the other textures in the scene. But that's really the only thing I can think of that stuck out to me. Everything else,
So I kind of want to go over some of this. Hopefully I'm not showing off anything too sussy. Every time I show my desktop raw, I end up showing something I don't want to show. Nothing too incriminating yet. Nobody's seen my goblins yet. I want to go to the page that he's talking to, that he doesn't like the effect. And I want to actually talk about why he does have a point. I later justify it in my own head with a couple other things. This is the effect that he doesn't like. This bar effect right here. It might be hard to tell, but you can kind of see, like, there's some 3D, and I've overlaid it with a noisy shadow, and and basically he's saying, like, oh, this clashes with this. To me, I wanted to show that there was a difference between the bars and the background, so I decided in my world, some objects are not going to be, like, I left, like, the walls and the backgrounds kind of like that. The only thing here is this suggestion box is pure white. So maybe if I colored that suggestion box a different color, they wouldn't have been so worried about. But it is kind of a discontinuity, but then I do it with this door here and this little panel here, like, oh, these metallic textures are all going to be blue. And then this here is more of a stylistic decision, but I understand there is some rough continuity with it. So I won't totally hold it against him for having that artistic criticism. I don't think it's invalid. This guy seems to know what he's talking about. He's been very kind to me otherwise, great words about the colors and the composition and the effects. So I'll take it. I agree to an extent. There was a reason for it. There's always these, sometimes the ideal comic, you'll have solved every problem perfectly and great. You want to go through Marvel Comics in the 70s and 60s and 70s and tell me that they all came out 100%. No. There's so many mistakes. Look up She-Thing, drawn by Jack Kirby, and you'll find a panel of her with a thumb on the wrong side of her hand. And Jack Kirby was doing that to She-Thing in Fantastic Four. How many issues in? How many comics had he drawn at that point? Draws thumb on the wrong side. So, eventually you're going to mess up, but I think he was fair in his criticism on the colors.
Really well done. I think the colors and everything, and like the perspective and stuff is really well done. So,
well, yeah, I'm looking at that page. That's interesting.
I got the impression the dragon took them back there. I just thought it was random. It's fair to say it's random. But the dragon, that's random, but it's like a shonen manga. There's random shit that pops up all the time. There's random crazy things that happen in One Piece of Dragon Ball all the time. I mean, that's part of where my inspiration comes. Random left field shit all the time. So, it doesn't have to be, for something to be like interesting and surprising, should I have made it more predictable?
On the wall or in these kind of Ben-Day dots with the bars in front with that completely different texture to them. And actually, I feel like it gives it kind of a 3D effect.
Yeah, it does. I guess, in my opinion, the 3D effect is, I don't like it, I guess.
Yeah, he doesn't like the metal bars.
But that's just my own personal taste, probably. There's something about it.
He doesn't like the metal bars.
It's the simplification of the characters and then like the over-textured background, or I'm not really sure, because I like that kind of look as well when it's like simplified characters on a, it's almost like a Cerebus kind of thing going on. But I can't really put my finger on.
Literally, Dave Sim, like one of the greatest comic book artists of all time, talking about dropping Cerebus in the critique. Hey, I'll take it.
On what it is about the textures that rubs me the wrong way, but
it's not just a first issue. It's my first comic book.
Have a really nice, smooth kind of balance to them. So
yeah. So yeah, this is an interesting one. I'm kind of curious to see what they're planning for it.
Okay, that's the best part. This is the best part. At the beginning, he says, a comic book we just couldn't pick up on. But then he literally goes right there. I'm curious what they're going to do. I'm curious. If I left you with curiosity at the end of the comic, what else? I think that's objective number one. If you're not curious, you're disinterested. You're not simultaneously curious and disinterested. You can't be both at once. So I have to believe that he's curious about this comic and not disinterested in it. And he didn't fully understand it. He didn't know what he was looking at. And how many pieces of great art, when they're introduced in their time and they're new and they're different and they're interesting, how many people are like, I don't really get it, but I'm curious. And I don't know. That's great. That's exactly what I want to happen in this instance. It's perfect because you can't be both at once. So I think it's a little bit of clickbait at the beginning. They're like, oh, maybe we'll get a roast on this one. It's not really a roast. They're kind of like
future issues.
Curious.
It was a very quick and easy read. I could have probably read this 3 or 4 times in 15 minutes.
Yes.
So, it's a fun.
But it's also a 34-page comic, which is almost twice as long as your average comic book. So, maybe it's not so much about the reading. Look at the art. Maybe you missed a few things in the art.
Playful book with fun.
But they're coming off of a 500-page noir. I get it. I think that's more what. And I think American comic books, the difference between American and Japanese comic books, I think has always been, it's Is too many words in an American comic book not enough in a Japanese comic? I lean way towards the Japanese, manga aesthetic of, let's show the story, not tell the story. I think that's something that a lot of American comics miss. And then people who are really into American comic books, they're so honed in on this like reading thing that when they're forced to just kind of sit and look at art, they don't know what to do with themselves. It's kind of like, somebody that's always occupying their mind or their hands, and then you force them to stand in a room without a fidget spinner for 5 minutes, and they're just like, ah! But maybe if they get through that, they can get the value in the space and the openness. I think they talk about
fun, playful artwork. And so, if this was a series, I could totally see. Well, I mean, I guess I should say it's also a very all ages kind of friendly book. So I could read this with my kids and we could both take something out of it, because there are points where I laughed as a middle-aged guy, and I'm sure that my children could find humor in it as, teenagers and stuff. So
okay, but yeah, I will link to their Kickstarter for each.
Go check out if you just want a kind of fun little diversion. Without having to think too much.
Does this comic not make you think too much, or did you not want to think too much about the comic? That's the only thing that I'm curious about, is that's what I'm talking about. Reading between the lines. What are people actually saying when they say something to you? Obviously, when they're going to talk about how they digested something, they're going to talk about their ability to digest it in the highest, in the brightest light possible, in the best light possible. But, when I go back and I dissect some things and some keywords, they talk about how they talk about the comic book, you can kind of start to see, it's like when your English teacher got a book report back from you, they could kind of tell if you read the book or not. And as a creator, you kind of, this is like seeing a book report. You can kind of grade it, and you can kind of understand, like, okay, this person was on about these points. There was a point of criticism in this that I understood. Was it make or break? No, it was something to consider. But when you're making a comic, when you're telling a giant story, it's, there's a lot of moving parts, things slip through, but I think it's manageable. I don't think too much is off here. So I would say this is more merited, and it is even kind of blended here too. One guy I felt like paid more attention than the other. And I raise an eyebrow at some things. Obviously, Toe is not white. They are gray. And that is actually going to be talked about later in the story. So it's funny. It's funny. This is how it is. But I think now I want to move on to, I think, the real reason why some of you are here. And